Hi, it's Agnet. Today I would like to talk about the Quran. How many times have you been left confused after a reading? Why does the Quran shift between themes and topics seemingly haphazardly? Why are some chapters dozens of pages long, whilst others are a mere few sentences? I will be answering these questions as well as presenting my perspective. Quran linguistically means recitation. In Surah Yusuf, it is said, "Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyan." We have revealed it to be an Arabic Quran. See, notice how the indefinite particle used, an Arabic Quran. Now, how does this make sense? If the Quran is the name of the book, then how is it that it's a Quran? This implies that there is more than one. Well, Quran is not actually the official name of the revelation. It simply means something which is recited. The Quran doesn't actually have an official name. It does have many names. It is called dhikr, which means remembrance. It is also called kitab, which means law, furqan, which means judge. And some people may be thinking, why does kitab mean law? Right? I thought it was known that it means book. But we have to understand that the Arabs of the 7th century were an illiterate people. They didn't have books, right? To them, books were these large tablets which you would carve on. They didn't think of papers which were folded, which is what we would think of. Things were only written down of great importance. Things such as law, finance, rules, authority, right? So they associated a book with very, very important matters. So when the Quran calls itself kitab, the connotation is that it is something of very great importance. What the Quran essentially is a collection of speeches, of conversations between God and man that occurred in very specific contexts. An example being Surah Fatiha, where the former half is God describing himself, the latter half being what mankind's response ought to be. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise and all thanks is to the Lord of the worlds, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the extremely merciful, the eternally loving, Maliki Yawmiddin, the master of the Day of Judgment. Right? We see here how the first part is God describing himself, and the latter part is our response. When we recite Surah Fatiha in our prayer, we are engaging in a direct conversation with God. This is the significance of the Quran if we understand it as a conversation rather than a book. The Quran is also very unique. It is its own category of literature. Some say that the Quran is a mixture between poetry and prose because it does not fit any of the known categories. It has its own style, right? An example of this is the structure of the Quran. In Surah Waqiyah, God swears by the positions of the stars. La uqsimu bi mawaqir nujum. That I swear by the positions of the stars. وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ. And this, if only you knew, is indeed a great oath. Why does God swear by the positions of the stars? Because if you were to look out at the night sky and look at these millions of lights, you would think they are random. But when you observe the stars closely, patterns and structures begin to appear, functioning as a means of guidance for those who are lost. وهو الذي جعل لكم النجوم لتهتدوا به في ظلمات البر والبحر قد فصلنا الآيات لقوم يعلمون. And he is the one who has made the stars as your guide through the darkness of land and sea. We have already made the signs clear for people who know. The same way that using the stars for navigation requires extensive observation, using the Quran for navigation requires extensive pondering. If we look at Surah Baqarah, the longest surah in the Quran, we can see how the first and last part is talking about faith and disbelief. The second and last part is talking about God's creation. The third and last part is talking about the law. And the fifth last part is talking about being tested, whereas Muslims and Abraham was tested. And the middle part, which is known as the jewel of the surah, is the transition between from the Jewish to the new universal faith, right, which is signified by the turning of the Qibla. So we see here this beautiful structure. In Surah Yusuf, we also see a very similar structure where it begins with the preface, then talks about Yusuf's dream, and the last part of the surah is talking about the fulfillment of his dream. Then what transpired with his family. We can see how it moves between topics and slowly returns to the start. We also see this structure in verses. For example, Ayatul Kursi, which is a very known verse of Surah Baqarah. It begins with naming two attributes of God, and it ends with that. And the second part is describing his power, that he does not get tired, nor does he sleep. And the third part talking about his domain, his kingdom. The fourth part talking about permission, that nothing happens except by his will. And the middle is that he knows what is before them and what will be after them. Right, the same way that he knows what came before this part of the verse and what comes after it. All of this shows that the Quran has a category of its own. The Quran, even though shares similarities with human literature, it very much has its own style, its own structure. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more content like this soon to come.